of the school board to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I think we have some help today from perhaps Robotic Club?
Robotics Camp.
Robotic Camp, thank you. So,
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
if you could just introduce them briefly of who they are, because I got them all. And then I think we're going to take a quick pic and then shake your hands. So,
You guys want to introduce yourselves? You can just go down the line.
I'm Zoe Williams.
I'm Marcus Lopez.
I'm Sydney Naniga. I'm Quincy Naniga.
I'm Rylan Anderson.
okay, and behind you.
Sarah Jaminski.
Okay.
And you're at Jaminski.
Okay. Thank you for being here. Let's get a quick picture with you.
I can't be in the back. Maybe should have been in the back row.
I know.
So, you guys in the front row, and then us bigger guys in the back row. You want to step forward?
Everybody shuffle that way a little bit.
Or you could just jump one and take a picture. But
Yeah.
All right, ready?
In.
1, 2, 3. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then you want to start up that end and come down the line here. Thank you for what you do. Oh, did you
I got
Thanks for being here. I'm right over here. Congratulations. Thanks for being here.
I'm the president.
Quick question
Yes.
for the robotics camp. You've had one camp already, and you have another one forthcoming?
We're in it right now. We just started today.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, again, thank you for being here and for all that you guys do and your interest for robotics and providing programs to USD-457.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with the following amendments. 1, remove item E5C, the therapeutic education program agreement. 2, additional certified and classified personnel actions for consideration, item E3. 3, add item E5F, certified physical therapy services agreement. 4, add item E5G, the 2018-19 state pre-K 4-year-old at-risk program. 5, add item E5H, the 2018-19 Kansas Parents as Teacher program. 6, add item E5I, the 2018-19 Kansas pre-K pilot grant. And 7, add item G2, the Board of Education Committee assignments sign-up.
Wonderful. Motion, is there a second? Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, we have a discussion. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Okay. Do we have any public comment? Okay, any correspondence? Okay, I guess we're ready for consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda, E1 through 5I.
Okay, motion, is there a second? Okay, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion passed. Okay, discussion items. We're ready for curriculum.
Well, it's my pleasure tonight to talk to you, I guess annually, about our recruiting, teacher shortage, where the district stands with that. So I guess to start off, to put it simply, is recruiting in Garden City is just hard work. Has been for a long time, continues to be harder each and every year, probably over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. So I'll talk to you a little bit about recruiting in general, what our process is, what we've kind of done in terms of our hiring, vacancies that we're anticipating for this upcoming school year. So Garden City, in my tenure, this will be my 21st year, I believe, in the district, has always had a fairly high turnover rate. 12 to 20%, that's been true when I was in the classroom, coming down to do some of my building leadership work, talking to then personnel director Jim Wentz. It was always been kind of the same thing. So it seems like that number may be a little bit inflated, but as you look around at different businesses in our community, talking to the hospital and to the sheriff's department, to the city itself, we kind of are right in the neighborhood that other businesses are facing. And I think actually on the lower side of that, the 12% is really not terrible in terms of what I've seen with other school districts. But right now it certainly is hard, the recruiting aspect of it. So we typically hire between 60 and 100 teachers a year. And one thing that's changed over the past, again, probably 4 or 5 years is recruiting used to be seasonal. So you do a little recruiting in the fall, maybe in anticipation of a few openings that we would have, getting out to colleges and then trying to get some December graduates, so you do a little bit of that. And then the big push was always in the springtime, later in the spring, typically in April. But that's really changed now. And so we essentially recruit all year long. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. One of the struggles, if you will, geography is not our friend. No trees, no water. And as we're getting outside of Kansas and recruiting there, the first question that people ask us is, what about the tornadoes? They always want to know if that's truly a big deal, hearing the stories and Dorothy and Wizard of Oz and all those kinds of things. So sometimes just putting that to rest is jokingly, but it is kind of a challenge when people are not familiar with our area. So typically in our process of recruiting, we do send out some exit surveys with our staff. Historically, we get about 50% of those surveys back. I read each and every one of those as they come through the office. This year, the number's probably a little lower in terms of that 50%, but basically over time, what we've gleaned from that information is there's 3 typical reasons for people leaving. Number 1, they want to be closer to family. That's always a big one. 2 is they're following a spouse because of transfer, the spouse has been transferred. Or 3, kind of goes back to the geography thing. Rural Kansas living just isn't for them. They want to be closer to a major metropolitan. They don't like the rural Kansas life. And those are typically our 3 biggest reasons that we get. This year holds true to that. We looked through 27 exit surveys, and 13 of them fell into those first 2. Want to be closer to family or following a spouse. So that trend continues to be what we see. So in our recruiting efforts, this is kind of a little bit about our process. So we start going to recruiting fairs. Typically we use teachers and administrators, and this has been a very good technique for us over time. Administratively, we have to go to so many fairs now that there's no way that the personnel office can do it, just from logistics standpoint. But beyond that, recruiting in Garden City has to become more than the HR office. It's really to our buildings, to our principals, to our staff, and essentially now community as well. And you know the impact good school systems have on communities, that's important. And so we do these meetings and these updates. One is to certainly inform the board, but two, inform our public and how we need to work together as a community and partnerships to try to do everything we can to recruit. So when we go to the recruiting fairs, administrators always go. They typically are going to give the administrative spiel, if you will, about why you should come to Garden City. But the biggest impact probably is when we take teachers. And so at a university level, as an example, you're going to go to a college. If we can go and talk to them about the benefits of coming to Garden City, starting their careers there, that's great. But the teachers who are either from the area or maybe even specifically from that college, when they get to tell their story about it's okay to live 4 hours from home, 8 hours from home, 15 hours from home, whatever that story might be, that has a bigger impact than what I'm telling them as an administrator. Because then they begin to believe that I can do this too. And so that's kind of the reason that we do teachers and administration. Our goal when we get to the recruiting fairs, maybe a little different than what people might think. Our goal is simply to collect as many resumes as we can, make as many contacts during that time as we can. We want to gather a pool of contact information that we can utilize when we get back home. Some of those recruiting fairs are not set up for us to be able to do that. Some of them will give us a certain amount of foot traffic time, if you will, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, and we have to get out and essentially become car salesmen, getting out, striking up conversations, doing those kinds of things to get people to come talk to us, because naturally they're not seeking out Garden City in most cases. So we spend our time making those contacts. Other school districts, they'll have a time for an interview process, and typically we don't do that either. Not that we don't feel like that's important, but in our process, one of our first things that we will do after gathering that contact information is we will set up a Skype interview, and our goal is to do that within 24 hours of the time that we make contact. So building administrators will sit in on those Skype interviews, and they're typically going to ask the same questions that I would 24 hours later, so we don't put them through twice to do that. And then once we complete the Skype interview, we give our building principals the autonomy to make the choice, is this a candidate that we want to be in Garden City? And if so, then our next step is to bring them out. So part of our recruiting process is that. I'm sure you've all heard that when you go to a job interview, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and that's the case with us too. We have a lot to be very proud of in Garden City, and so getting the candidates here with little background information about what we are as a community, what we are as a school family, then it gives them an opportunity to walk through our buildings, get to meet our staff depending on the time of year it is, see our facilities, certainly what we have to offer as a community, and that's been very, very successful for us in the past to be able to do that. It takes a little bit of time to do that, and in some cases you might think that we're losing out some opportunity, but we want people to choose us as well, us as a community and as a school. The other piece that we've kind of started doing over the last couple of years is offer of employment, if you will, letter of intent, essentially offering a position on the spot, sight unseen. So again, another reason to have administration being on the recruiting side of things is that they can make those decisions, communicating with the personnel office. If they find a blue chip candidate that's a math endorsed or a science endorsed or special education, we give them the autonomy to try to offer that contract essentially right on the spot. And that's worked for us in some cases, and in other cases not so much. And I can understand both sides of it. We are essentially freezing a job or holding a job by doing the offer of employment for them, guaranteeing them a position. So from that standpoint, it's worked that we're telling that candidate that we want them to be a part of our team. We're serious about opportunities that we have in our community, so that they are thinking, I'm going to spend all the time, I'm going to spend the money, the resources to go to Garden City, and what if I don't ever get offered a position? So from that perspective, it does help to let them know that we're serious about it. From the other side, maybe the negative side, is that's a big deal. We recruit a lot of people, which I'll get into a little bit later, from all over the nation, essentially. And to try to make a decision, I have a daughter who's going to be a sophomore in college. If she was to tell me that she's going to take a position that she's never been to the community, never seen the town, and she's ready to move there sight unseen, I would begin to question what she's thinking. So I can see that perspective. Big move, big opportunity. So we don't want to stress people out by doing that, but again, using it almost as something to entice them, to get them to come, is what that offer of employment does. And then the last thing on the slide talks about offering positions. Again, that's maybe the end step in our process. So once we get them here, we help with some travel expenses, certainly try to cater to them if they're flying in, bringing a train. We'll give them a car to drive for a couple days. We'll put them up in a hotel room for a couple days. Give them the grand tour, if you will. Anybody that has a position open that they would be qualified for, then they're going to get to tour with that building principal or a designee, and they go around to each one of those. And at the end of that, this is where we might differ from other districts. The HR person, personnel guy, isn't in a room saying you're going to be great and I'm going to put you in a third grade in this building. We give the principals the autonomy to make the offers, but we also give the candidates the autonomy to make that choice. So somewhere along the lines, they're going to make a connection with that building principal. It might be the leadership, it might be the building as a facility, it might be the kids that they're going to serve, maybe the area of town, but somewhere they're going to say, you know what, that's home to me. I want to teach there. And they might have 6 offers on the table, and they'll get to select that one that they feel connected to. And we certainly think that helps on the backside of our retention because they get to have choice too. So, as I mentioned, recruiting's tough. Has been getting tougher and tougher. So here's just a few little data points. Education, we love our data. We were at an Impact Institute the other day at Fort Hays State. Dr. Randy Watson, Commissioner of Education, was doing the opening, and he told us at that opening remarks that Fort Hays will have the smallest number of graduates in the field of education in his memory, in his history. And so certainly that's one of the available resources we have in terms of colleges, Western Kansas, and they have the smallest number of people choosing to be in education. Additional data, Kansas State University put out some information in 1994, which is one of their biggest classes. They had 1,916 students that were choosing education as a major. That's been on the decline since 1994, resulting in the last data point that we had is 2016 with 1,163. Again, students making choices to make education their career. And so by shrinking the number of candidates, or the pool, if you will, that we have, it certainly makes it tougher and tougher for us to compete in recruiting. Denver Post article published April 13, 2017. Colorado needed 3,000 new teachers to fill their existing slots, while the number of graduates in their teacher prep program were on the decline, almost 25%. So again, our neighboring states, same thing. Not as many candidates to choose from. Eastern Michigan University, we recruited in Michigan successfully for 10 years probably at least. And we've seen this over the past. Personally, I've experienced it in going to Eastern Michigan, talking to the people that are in charge of the recruiting fair. But this is an email that was sent out to me April 12, 2017, indicating the number of people that had registered for the recruiting fair, 142 school districts, and they only had 264 candidates pre-registered. So if you share things equally, less than 2 candidates per school district to choose from.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You know, the information on those emails are a challenge to those universities as well. I think that would affect their professorships and their staffing. Do they offer anything more than that as far as how to turn that thing around?
That's a good question. I don't know that universities are to that point where they're doing anything different. Are you talking about like?
Well, anytime you have that kind of difference in student participation in a particular profession, you're going to have professors having to change jobs.
Sure.
So I would think that would be pretty significant.
So this is dated, but when we talked a year ago around the same topic, you know, one of the things, we had a principal that was going on vacation, heading to some northern states, and so on the way, we were just going to send him to a a few colleges on the way to see if we could pick up any late candidates in that process. So we called 35 universities in the state of Wisconsin, and 6 of those universities no longer offered a teacher prep program. So they simply stopped the program. Now they have kids going into the field of education, which kind of goes back to your question that, so if they couldn't sustain having the professorships and doing those kind of things, that was their alternative, was to do away with it. It wasn't lucrative for the university to continue in that pathway. So I don't know that we're there necessarily, but it certainly is a concern for us as professionals to be able to, we have to be proud of what we do. We have to get the message out of what a great field this is to be in. But we need it from us as educators, but we also need it from our community. We need it from the universities. And this is going to take a while for this to turn around because we dug ourselves a little bit of a hole. So
what I heard you saying earlier, really, during your tenure, there's really been a shift where we're now year-round thinking in these terms of recruitment.
for sure.
Almost creating a culture of recruitment,
Absolutely.
extending into the community as well.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll get a little more about the history. So based on the information that I just shared, it is somewhat forcing universities to look at things a little bit differently. It's also forcing state departments to look at things differently, and certainly us as a school district to look at things differently. And some of those are what you see in front of you in terms of alternative licensing. So some of the data that I just shared is about people choosing education in a traditional teaching pathway, a traditional teaching program. But there are some other ways to get licensed to become a teacher. So one of the first ones that I'll talk about is the Transition to Teach, T2T program. And essentially what that program is, there are several universities that do it. I'll talk a little bit about Fort Hays because we do a lot of work with them, but not preferencing them over any other. But Fort Hays State, essentially, if I have a degree that I went and got a bachelor's degree and I wanted to be a business major and I was going to go start my own business. And 5 years later, 6 years later, 7 years later, I've realized that I don't want to do that anymore. I should have went into teaching. I've been called to teach, and now that's what I want to do. So in the past, I would have to really go back to school through a traditional teaching program and spend time and money to be able to do that. But we've changed this alternative licensure piece so that the Transition to Teaching program with a bachelor's degree, I can send that to Fort Hays State. They'll review my transcript and they'll say, you're going to be certified to teach in biology, let's say. I have enough content background that I can go teach 7th through 12th grade biology, and that's what they'll certify me in. So they make a recommendation to the state to be able to do that, and then 2 things have to happen. It's a little bit weird, a little bit of bureaucracy, but we have to be able to offer them a job for them to get into the program, but we can't offer them a job until they're accepted in the program. So we have to work together with the universities to do that kind of at the same time. So what happens then is that person who has a certification now to be able to teach biology, then they're going to teach during the day, and then in the evening times, they're going to learn about pedagogy or the art of teaching. And so they'll take classes, and that's a 2-year program. Once they've completed that, then they can become fully licensed in that particular area, in this case, 7th grade biology. So that's the Transition to Teach program. We've utilized that program for a while and have been pretty successful. Currently have 19 employees that have either enrolled or have completed a Transition to Teach program. So again, having to utilize alternative methods. The second program there that I'll talk about in terms of alternative licensure is a program that K-State started a couple of years ago. It's called the MAT program. It's the Master's in Art of Teaching. And it's really designed like a Transition to Teach program that I just described, only instead of addressing the 7th through 12th grade content area, it is designed to let someone go into the field at an elementary level. So any bachelor's degree counts. That'll get them into the program. They apply for grad school. It's an accelerated program, so they start off at the end of the year. Essentially, they do a summer, they do the fall, they do the spring, they do the summer, and then they're complete with their coursework. And what will happen to them is then they come out with a master's degree and also their elementary teaching credentials. And for elementary, it would be kindergarten through 6th grade. So this gets another side of, another level, if you will, of teaching candidates. And we've had 6 people complete that program and also been successful in that. The next program is our TAP program from WSU, the Teacher Apprentice Program. Originally, this program was designed to give some of our classified people an opportunity to go back, finish schooling, and essentially get their teaching credentials. And it's a little bit unique in the fact that they don't have to student teach through this program. If they are in a program for a year and working in a school district, it could be a substitute position, or it could be, provided it's long-term, there's hours involved, or it could be a classified position, something like a paraprofessional, then they'll give them that credit as their student teaching, and so they can actually go into the workforce a year sooner than they could otherwise through a traditional program. And we currently have one para that has done that, worked through her degree process, and she'll be teaching for us in the fall. So that may be something else that we are tapping into in the future. Additionally, just working with other universities, Newman's been a great partner for us on lots of different levels, but they're always looking at ways to try to help in terms of teacher licensure, really reviewing transfers from people, trying to take as many credits as they possibly can through their program, giving people an opportunity to essentially start where they're at, regardless of degree holders or not, and then getting them into some sort of teacher program. And then lastly, this has been successful for us in the past. If we have candidates in an area that are typically saturated, such as PE as an example, or in some cases in years past, even some of our elementary jobs, when we didn't have any trouble filling elementary, that would be one of the first levels that would fill up. Then if we had a great candidate came in and we didn't have any other teaching positions available that they were qualified for, then we might talk to them about, have you considered taking some special education classes and maybe going to get a provisional and teaching sped for us just to get your foot in the door, to be here in our community, and we've utilized that in the past too. So those are all kinds of different areas that we focused on in terms of this alternative licensure to combat some of the low candidacies that we have around the state and the nation. So when I was at the Impact Institute, it was on Fort Hays campus, and then this is just some pictures that I have taken, maybe to illustrate my point a little bit. So what you see right now is a graph of our state, and this is all transition to teaching placements. So when we start thinking about, and I'm certainly not trying to be negative about Garden City, but we start thinking about Garden City, well, is it just us? Are we the only ones struggling? And I think this is a great picture to show that we are not the only ones that are utilizing alternative licensure. So the black dots that you see, these are people that are going through the transition to teaching program. And remember, they have to be offered a position in order to get into that program. And they had 98 teachers that started that in 2016. We, of course, were a part of that. And then in 2017, that went from 98 to 143 in that same program. People getting an alternative licensure. So that is becoming huge, and it's great for us. I mean, we want more teachers or more people to choose education as a career, and this is certainly an example of people doing that maybe after the fact. So again, more along these same lines, it's hard to see, but in the very bottom left-hand corner here, this is fiscal year 2003. There was 4 participants in the Transition to Teach program in 2003. So follow that trend all the way, fiscal year 18, I think it's 148 people that are in that Transition to Teach program. So you can see that the need is there, certainly, in order to use these alternative licensure pieces. So a little bit about our history. Mark, you talked a little bit about this, and has it become a year-long adventure to do recruiting? And I certainly think that this shows that it has. So 2007, these are the number of unfilled positions that we had, 2007, 2008. We had 31. I got a whole lot better really quickly in that next year, down to 16. And then through Dr. Carlin's cushy years when he was doing HR, it got better and better. As far back as I could find in terms of data with where we were going, we were recruiting, the number of career fairs we were attending, those kinds of things. So that was essentially end of the year 12-13, they went to 6 states and 17 career fairs. That's what they did, and they still only had 5 unfilled positions. So you can see the change as we move through. Last year, big year for us, 42.5 positions. That number is big, but we include everything. If we could fill the position, we'd fill it. So you're going to see some comparisons, maybe with some other school districts and things like that, and that's not an even comparison. Everybody reports things a different way. If I were to fill a position with a long-term sub, some districts aren't counting that because they have the position covered, so they're not counting that as a vacancy. In my world, that's still a vacancy. We don't have a licensed teacher in that spot, so I'm still counting those things. So don't let the numbers scare you, and I guess understand that numbers by districts are going to look a little differently based on their choice in terms of reporting. And so 32 with a question mark, again, we're still in the process of hiring. We're still in the process of recruiting. So that number hopefully doesn't get inflated. Resignation time is over. We are no longer accepting resignations. but 32 is a ballpark, and like I said, we'll continue to work on that number as we go forward. But what do we do to combat that? Again, 19 states and 45 career fairs. I mean, it's amazing the travel that we do and our outreaches, if you will, in order to recruit and find our qualified candidates that we need. So other recruiting methods, we have an employee incentive program. This has been outstanding for us. We have been funded by an outside company, Heritage Inn and Suites in Paraco Water Park. Have been gracious enough to provide us with some dollars that we can give back to our employees in their efforts to help us recruit. So essentially how the program works is if I can convince a colleague, maybe in a different district, like we'll say Dodge City, if I know somebody in Dodge, we know that we offer great benefits, great school system here, I can convince them to come and apply in Garden City. They put my name on their application and they're hired in a position, then me as an employee of USD-457, I get a $500 reward. Okay? That person signing a new contract with us will also get $500, but it's in the form of a signing bonus that is through our negotiated agreement. But this has been really great for us. So we have 20 available per year. In the first year, 16-17 of doing, we had 9 staff members take advantage. That went up to 19 in the 17-18, and we currently have 12 staff members that have taken advantage of that so far. And again, 12 people hired for us that our staff has helped do. So again, bigger than the HR office, bigger than building principals, it's your colleagues, it's community, it's bigger. And so certainly, we appreciate our business partner in doing that, and we also appreciate our employees who have stepped up and helped us out with that. Student teaching incentive is something else that we've started a few years ago. Essentially in this incentive, we're enticing people, paying them, if you will, to come and student teach in our district. It's illegal for us to put a student teacher under contract, so we don't do that. But we do give them a stipend for student teaching with us. We've had a very high success rate in terms of hiring them. So the first year that we did it, these student teachers would have been the fall of the 16-17 school year. We hired 6 that spring to become full-time teachers with us. That's part of the incentive, a trade-off. So if you sign the contract to do the student teaching incentive, then you're going to trade that out for 2 years of service with USD-457. If you don't meet that 2 years of service, then you have to pay the money back. And also, if you are offered a position and choose not to accept it, then you have to pay the money back. So that's how the incentive works. For the following year, the fall, that number went up to 13. Again, 13 people hired out of the student teaching pool, and then we'll have 10 more that will be eligible for that this spring. They're student teaching currently in the fall, and they'll be eligible for hire at Christmas time, essentially. So other things that we continue to do is just promoting the opportunities that we have. When we're out in colleges talking about those kinds of things, talking about other benefits and incentives that we have. Board faculty meetings, we share that out with our own employees so that they have students, their own children that are getting ready to go into education and possibly student teach. We want them to come back home, and so we just talk about those kinds of things. And then we're constantly looking to extend our partnerships with universities. We now have a formal partnership with University of Nebraska-Kearney. They're sending us student teachers. We met with Emporia last week, and they're interested in doing the same thing. We now have a big influx of K-State student teachers, something that's changed over the last probably 4 years with the use of technology. K-State student teachers were not allowed to student teach anywhere beyond 60 miles of Manhattan. And so because of technology and our partnership with them, we've been able to do that. So always trying to be flexible and change with the needs of the recruiting process. So the other thing that we really are needing to focus on is a Grow Your Own program. So all of the data that I presented to you up front was about just not having students choose education. So also with the exit surveys, we talked about those 3 main reasons why people leave. Want to be closer to family, rural Kansas living isn't for them. Well, by doing the Grow Your Own program, we're going to combat two of those 3 reasons. So they've already grown up here, they're Western Kansas kids, Garden City kids, going to be closer to family anyway, so we want to grow our own, and we start with that program in the high school. We have a teacher that's designated with a pre-service program, if you will, maybe a Foundations of Ed class where they're going to get some experience in the classroom. We work with Garden City Community College in a partnership so we can get scholarships for them. My job moving forward will be to clean up that process and make it more systemic. How do we advertise it more? How do we work with families? Maybe this is a first-generation college student. They don't know how to fill out FAFSA information. They don't know what opportunities they have. So really cleaning up that system so that it's easy. So when maybe the high school biology teacher has a student that they know will be a great teacher, where do they send them? Where do they go? Counselor, can they take care of it? Do they send them where? So that's part of our next steps, is really to hone this Grow Your Own program. Last kind of pieces of the puzzle in terms of retention or recruitment is staff retention, and this is huge. And so we are working on it. We have a retention committee. We know that if we can obviously cut down on the number of separations that we have, better job satisfaction, we won't have less openings, and certainly that will make it easier in the times where it's harder to find candidates. So we'll put more of an emphasis on this maybe than we have in the past. Our staff retention committee will meet monthly this coming school year, and they've already got some things in place that they're doing for our onboard process with our new hires, and in terms of just getting out and finding out, what are the stressors, what things can we control, what things can't we control, getting more feedback as a whole in terms of our district.